put myself on the end of the agenda. That seemed fair at the end of the day. So I'm going to close us out with a little discussion about the wider picture on the energy system. I think we're talking about EV as the green transport solution, and that is definitely going to be true when we decarbonise the grid fully. At the moment, electricity has the same carbon factor as gas and a similar carbon factor to petrol. It's when we get the grid emissions down that we can really talk about EV as the green transport solution. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of some of the factors in play on that, and I'll be relatively brief so we can get to some questions. I should say I work for a government-funded programme BASE to help disseminate this information around the Northwest, and I can say, having compared our part of the world to others, that there's a lot going on that we can be very proud of, both in Liverpool City region and more broadly. Lots of climate emergencies declared by councils up and down the patch, and real intention from senior people now to act on the statements of intent they've been making. Government have not only got their road to zero policy, but on the business, energy and industrial strategy side, they've a plan to upgrade our energy system. This is a very dry subject, and I won't go into it too much. I'm excited about the new metering code P375. That is coming through, hopefully, to allow a sub-meter to pass through all charges back to a second supplier. Okay, how interesting. It would mean that somebody could put an electric vehicle charging station on their site, and a third-party energy supplier could provide the electricity to charge those vehicles. So it unpicks this problem of having who your energy supply is coming from. And there's other changes like that that are going to be needed wholesale from government to make the smart energy system of the future possible. Your smart meter at home is one step in that direction as well, where you could get half-hourly incentives to use energy or not use energy. We're all going to go on a big journey as consumers. The idea being that if we automate it enough, we won't have to all become as passionate as I am about metering codes. But I think a lot is afoot, and the energy white paper that government has paused for now is going to be quite a heavy piece of legislation that will start to move this agenda forward and accelerate it. So a smart energy system is one in which we share energy between different consumers, and it's a vexed question how that will be determined. And I think the answer is we're going to let market forces decide where the infrastructure goes on a cost basis, while recognising that for the bigger infrastructure there's going to need local energy plans and work with DNOs, SP energy networks. That's why the city region is keen to partner with our DNO to think about how this is going to work in practice. And you're going to need to run some scenarios so you don't invest in and then have a stranded asset that can't actually play its role in the system. So there's a lot of work before us. We talked today about the need to electrify for transport, and we've also touched on the fact that heat is also going to be very important. The grid in this part of the world is going to need selective reinforcement through smart charging, but this graph on the side here shows you that the peak demand for heat in the winter compared to what people use power for could sort of double our need for electricity at given times of day. So spreading that load out, as we've heard, is going to just be so critical. And this is coming from the Committee on Climate Change, who are saying this is a national infrastructure challenge that has to be tackled across all policy levels. This is what the home of the future looks like in some literature that's been put out, and it becomes awfully complicated very quickly. You might have a hydrogen supply to your hybrid gas boiler, an electric heating system that's also being charged from your car. You might have solar panels on the roof that are charging at some time of the day and exporting to the grid at another time of day. And I do believe this is the sort of thing we're going to need, but it also seems awfully complicated to me. So I wonder if there isn't going to be a sort of bottoming out of the solutions in time. There will be solutions that are having their day now that won't come to fruition. I think two options for energy storage, for instance, are very large batteries on the grid, playing a balancing role, or at home you could store your power or your hot water. That there is a thermal battery that's taking electricity to charge a thermal store. We've got the first commercial example of that in Wirral Met College on the other side of the river, and that's helping balance out some local generation so it can be used from different parts of the day. But what is the disruptive technology that we're expecting to see an awful lot of is those EV vehicles parked up beside buildings and then playing their role in a power to grid function. And we don't know until we get going with it how that will work in practice, because it might be all very well to have an EV vehicle, but if you've driven it off to work, it's not going to be at home to charge up with solar power that might be trickling to other uses. So it's interesting times for anyone in the agenda. We've heard today that hydrogen vehicles are less efficient than electric vehicles, and that is definitely the case. So if you want hydrogen gas, you have to make it from steam methane reformation, which has a fossil fuel implication, and by the time you've converted it using electricity into that gas and transported it, it is not as efficient as just plugging it directly into a renewable energy source. But it could overcome the seasonal variation issue we have. So although it might be more costly to create it, it might be the only way to carry energy from summer months into the winter months. And so we see it as playing a very important role in this part of the world as a transport fuel for heavier vehicles and a fuel to decarbonise industry. And I'd say we're on the fence about whether it will heat homes. But because of our cluster of assets along the Mersey, both in this part of the world and over the border in Cheshire and Warrington, there is an opportunity, particularly in the north of England, to really go big on hydrogen economy. And I think if you look at government policy direction, it's going to trial a few things out in the next 3 to 4 years before it puts its... Well, it may never make a decision about what it wants to do, but it's keeping our options open in that regard. So there's... the Metro Mayor's policy here will have both hydrogen in it and tackle this electrification challenge. I worry sometimes about whether or not there's enough green energy we could ever generate. A few years ago, you could read reports which would said that we've got a limit in terms of what the countryside could support if you industrialised it, and roofs can only take so much solar power. Onshore wind has planning risks. This report was out last week, and it's interesting. It says that if we just built out the near shore shallow waters around the world, not going off coast, we could satisfy the current power demands of the world. That's because of advances in the technologies. And floating turbines are hoving into view, perhaps. I don't know enough to say whether or not they'll be a thing of the future, but at some point you might be able to generate 18% of the world's 18 times over what the world needs in terms of renewable energy. And of course, Britain, being coastal, can really take advantage of that. And in fact, I haven't put the slide in this version of my deck, but the city region is home to operational and maintenance supply chain that serve the wind in Liverpool Bay. But I wanted to make it a little bit less if I've got the slide. Here we go. I wanted to make it a little bit less big picture than that. So I've done some numbers on home energy use to try and give us all a handle on how much energy we need for different uses. Now this slide is incorrect because it's an earlier version of slides that I've loaded up. I'll tell you what the fixed slide says. It says that the average home drives 22 miles a day. A petrol vehicle uses 1 kilowatt hour to go 1 mile. And the EV vehicle, 4 times more efficient in the long run, 4 miles per kilowatt hour. And if you compare that to what we use in the home, it's actually very similar to your daily demand for hot water. So you charge your hot water tank using about 5 kilowatt hours, and you would be driving using about 5 kilowatt hours. You use about that much power in your home. So those three are roughly equivalent. Your heating for certain times of the year is 3 times as much as that again. So first time I've ever done those sums, it gave me a sort of sense of the order of magnitude. Now, if I want to supply that demand from solar panels, I could cover one side of my house, south-facing roof, and satisfy just one of those loads. So maybe I charge my hot water, maybe I charge my car, or maybe I put it into my power supply. I think we might see solar panels on both sides of people's roofs. Although east and west facing panels aren't as efficient, if you did both, you can run that sunshine into your equipment all day long, and you would begin to satisfy quite a lot of the need of your energy from local solar power. But you wouldn't be able to satisfy all of it, and this is where the regulation around sharing energy between buildings comes in. Because the sun shines some of the time, the wind blows some of the time, and we use energy when we want to use energy, and it's moving the energy around in the day that's going to be important. We have a problem in that at the moment the installation of solar energy has fallen off a bit of a cliff. We had a removal of the feed-in tariff. I think there will be replacement for that, which will be a payment for export, which will stabilise in time and make the business case for solar stack up again. That's certainly the intention of government. But I think that it's consumers adopting electric vehicles and electrification of heating that will drive this as a consumer choice, and that will see solar tick up again. So I'm no longer worried that we've got enough green energy to supply our homes and our vehicles. It's about the network being able to adapt to it, and the consumer switchover, and the cost of the capital bits of kit coming down that's going to be important. We need to be able to make this decision and see it pay back in a few years, not in a decade and a half. Government has consulted on the cost of energy and is minded to make some big changes. They asked Dieter Helm to do a review of the cost of energy. He recommended a carbon tax, as everybody always does. That may come in future, and in the meantime, we're going to allow time of use tariffs, offer a price for power that's firm, so that it can be used reliably, and that is the sea change that we expect to see in the next few years. I did a little sum to figure out how much solar power the public estate needs in the northwest of England. 1,400 rugby fields would satisfy 2% of the energy demand of public buildings in the northwest, or 35 of these very large offshore wind turbines. So there's a question there about where we best put our money. I personally don't follow the rugby. I understand we're not bad at it. It might be a shame to convert those rugby pitches. This is the problem with the energy sector. Some prefer golf and some rugby, and who knows where we're going to be putting all this infrastructure. But I think we've cause to be optimistic that the technologies solutions we need to decarbonise rapidly are there, and it's a policy challenge and a local planning and delivery challenge. And hopefully we won't wind up with these horribly complex systems. So I think I'll stop there, since this slide deck lacks a few of the others I put in. But we'll be circulating all of our slides after the event, provided our speakers are happy with it. There's a speaker I couldn't invite to join us today. John's here from eSymphony. He has a solution to convert taxis and a video that explains how. We'll be putting that on with the materials as well. And I hope you've enjoyed today. I thanked the speakers in advance this morning before I'd heard them speak, but having heard them speak, I can warmly thank them for some very eloquent presentations on this agenda, which is, I think, quite a fascinating one. So thank you very much for coming today.